5 of the best cars ever. That is a tall order. And no, we didn't include the Shelby GT500 CR or the Bentley EXP 100 GT or even the Carrera GT. Yes, this list is full of controversy. Get your hate gloves on because today on Idealist, we're gonna go for it. Let's go. There is no way to even choose the top 10, let alone narrow it down to 5 without getting it wrong. So instead of making it the ultimate definitive list, we have 2 qualifiers. First, only 1 per country. So no Carrera GT came in 911 and 918 and 959 and sweeping the whole thing, you know? Second, we're gonna stick to production cars only. So no Hellcat Miata superfans. And yes, of course, this is super subjective. I encourage you to make your own list in the comments. Seriously, tell me your top 5 production cars. Go down there right now, 1 per country. I'll definitely read them, and maybe we'll have a part 2 or 3 or 10. Anyway, let's begin with a car that still represents everything Japan is great at, even though it is getting a little bit old. The Nissan R35 GT-R. Now, our buddy Strad just built one to like over 1,000 horsepower, and it's like a Bugatti killer and all this cool stuff. And that's because when the R35 came out in 2007, well, the Skyline, it was already a household name in the United States, despite it never being sold here. See, thanks to the media like Gran Turismo, Forza, Initial D, yeah, all these up here. Plus, a little movie called, Too Fast, Too Furious. Anybody who even liked cars a little itty bit knew of the Skyline GT-R, aka Godzilla, was a force to be reckoned with. No one was really prepared for how good the R35 was. Let me put it this way. It has been 15 years since its debut, and it's still one of the best performance cars you can buy for the money. The track time it set down on the ring is still respectable, and people are still tuning these things into supercar slaying monsters. That alone does not justify a place on this list today. After all, the Lexus LFA is also a truly amazing piece of engineering, and if we are purely basing it on legacy, the older R32, the real Godzilla, is probably even more iconic than its younger sibling. But the R35, to me, best represents what Japan is capable of. It is a mass-produced car using relatively cheap parts that normal people that you and me can afford and get to drive. Well, afford maybe, if you use the ideal car strategies. And no, it's not a weird Italian car held together with duct tape, or this super high-powered American muscle car that is barely even drivable, or an expensive German luxury sedan that's just fast, but will destroy your wallet before you can even count to 2. Yes, you can count to 2, right? And that is why the R35 GT-R absolutely deserves a spot on the list of the greatest cars ever built. Of course, the GT-R has always had one very important rival, and the car that really every sports car wants to be. Yes, we're talking about the Porsche 911 or 911. It was legitimately difficult to choose what I thought should be the best 911, the GT3 RS. It certainly is a contender, and well, the 997 GT2 RS also is great, but guess what? I settled on the Widowmaker, because what a sick name, and how it earned it is even cooler. We're talking about today the 1977 Porsche 911 Turbo, probably the most famous word in car history. I mean, can you think of a more famous word? The advertisements sum it all up. Nothing comes close. It was called the 930 here in the States, but to the rest of the world, it was the 911 Turbo, a car just so that Porsche could keep racing and winning, and to destroy the notion that every car was destroyed in 1975. 256 horsepower and life-changing handling characteristics were what you got from this P car. During a time when the rest of the world could not build a car to save their lives. Gas crisis, a 4-cylinder Dodge Charger, canceled Skyline GT-Rs, and a Corvette that only put out 180 ponies. Yet there was Porsche with a car that was so fast it actually killed people. We mentioned it in our video about the Carrera GT that Porsche is no stranger to making cars like this. Cars that are too fast for normies to drive. The 911 Turbo was their first foray into that madness. It had 2 major issues, just like your ex-girlfriend. First, most people just don't know how to drive a rear-engine car. It takes special touch of the right toe. And 3 of the most terrifying words in motorsports: do not lift. Once you aim for the apex and start into the turn, you cannot let off the gas. If you're going too fast, you gotta pin it. You need to let that rear push you all the way through, which is terrifying in a Civic, and turn it up to 11 on the Fearometer when you are piloting a 250 horsepower death trap. That's just the normal 911. The turbo adds an extra layer of extreme danger because the turbo can kick or engage in the middle of a turn. And if you're not prepared, it will spin you right around. Or worse, scare novice drivers into breaking rule number 1. You know, a lot of drivers would lift and try to scrub off speed when the turbo kicked in, which meant that, whoops! Now you're in a tree, and the Widowmaker has claimed another one. But my God, despite the danger, which is my middle name, it's still one of the most amazing cars to ever be invented. It is a manual, it has no safeties, and looks absolutely fantastic to boot. I mean, look at this rear end. I could stare at that all day. Wouldn't kick it out of my garage, which is why it is on our list representing Germany. After all that danger, let's take a mid-segment break and do something safe. Don't worry, we'll be right back to cars that want to kill you soon enough. But first, Great Britain original Mini Cooper. I mean, how can you not love this thing? I'll admit it, I almost didn't want this on this list. It's a slow front-wheel drive car, but you can't argue with legacy. There are very few cars in this world that are more recognizable and as universally loved as a Mini. Seriously, think of all the places that you've seen one. On the silver screen, like hundreds of movies? Yeah. In old footage of the Monte Carlo Rally? Yeah. Other off-road races? Yeah. Or just part of every British car show ever? Yeah. And not only are they fun to look at, but they're also fun to drive. As fun as an underpowered go-kart can be. But that's not the point. The point is that the Mini was an entire automotive revolution. It's one of the first cars to ever use a front-wheel drive transverse layout engine in order to both maximize space and keep production costs low, which is a formula that was basically copied by every automaker ever. You thought the Kia just pulled the soul out of their butts? Nah, it took some mad lads at the British Motor Company in 1956 who were in the middle of dealing with record high gas prices to invent a shape that would define the style of a nation. And for that only, we can't help but also love the Mini Cooper. And that's the UK deal. And so let's head to south to Italy, which of course has a lot of cars to choose from. Miura, Countach, Zonda. How about the Maserati Ghibli? I had you. No, seriously, do you ever watch this channel? It has to be a Ferrari, and it has to be a Ferrari F40. AKA the last car ever personally approved by Enzo Ferrari himself. It is the most Ferrari ever built. Incredibly exclusive, incredibly expensive, and truly mind-boggling fast. For the time, nowadays, most hypercars would leave it behind at the track. But when it came out, at first auto journalists hated it. They thought it was a useless cash grab by Ferrari, something that the company was just speculating on, hoping that old man Enzo would kick the bucket and that prices would just skyrocket. Ferrari, well, they fought back and forced journalists to drive the F40 against the amazing Porsche 959. It was a gamble that, guess what? They lost, since the journalists all agreed that the Porsche had made the better car. The Porsche, it was luxurious, it was fast, it was poised, and it was easier to drive. The Ferrari was a tube-frame death trap that rattled and smoked. They called it clunky, cantankerous, and they said it was like being in a Bangkok prison. And yet, looking back, nothing is as special as an F40. It was crude, I agree. It was a huge engine strap to a tube frame straight from the 60s with nothing but a weak plastic shell to protect you from the environment. It is brutal, it is terrifying, and that means it gives you the feelings that no other car this side of the racetrack can. In my opinion, that every driver should at some point drive a car that is this raw, that has no room for error, and that wants to kill you. Yes, the F40 is the most raw vehicle ever conceived, and it is the last of its kind. There is zero chance that another car like it will ever exist, ever. Okay, TM to the last one. And this is such a heavy episode. My heart rate is going 190 beats per minute. Holy crap, someone call the doctor. I could talk about the F40 for 30 minutes, but I could also talk about this next one for an hour. In fact, we kind of have, because the astute amongst us will have realized that we haven't talked about the good old USA yet. So let's head there for a car that is very near and dear to the ideal hearts. Dodge Viper. And yes, like a lot of the other countries, there are a lot of contenders from the States. I mean, there's the Mustang, of course, since nothing is more America than their premier pony car. Or, well, there's the Corvette, the blue-collar hero that still dominates race days across America. And then, you know, you got the GT-40, a car that's so great that they actually made a tier movie about it. But none of them are as fast or as insane as the Viper ACR. Yes, when it came out in 2010, it was the 6th fastest production car to ever put down a time at the Nürburgring, knocking out the Porsche 918, the Lexus LFA Nürburgring Edition, the GT3, and the mighty GT-R. Dodge, some company that routinely needs to be saved by the government, that can't seem to decide if they are the most insane or the most practical car maker out there, came out of nowhere and made their undrivable front engine killing machine one of the all-time fastest production cars ever built, and then sold it to the public at about the same price as a fully loaded Vet? They insane? No, that's America, baby. Other companies, Chevy, had to make mid-engine cars, use crazy technology like free valve and computer-controlled all-wheel drive, or build dedicated Nürburgring editions at 5 times the price. Meanwhile, the boys over at Dodge just took a gigantic primitive engine, stuck a wing on it, and said, hey, go for it. That was 12 years ago. No American car can touch that lap time. Hell, no Japanese car can either. It's only a handful of Porsches, Lambos, and Ferraris, and a couple of one-off special editions at the top, having their heels nipped by the British, testosterone-fueled snake design in the Stone Age. Hell yeah, baby. And that is the list. Like I said, give me the list down in the comments. Then watch the video on the Viper over here. It's our overdrive, and you are going to love it. Just like 800,000 other people that liked it already. My name's Brad, this is Ideal, and promise me one thing, keep living the ideal lifestyle.